So welcome everybody. My name is Susan Barber and I am the Community Education Manager at Mission Hospice and Home Care. And it's so wonderful to see you all. I'm really grateful to Diane Burns-Haussler, who's going to be giving a talk about her book, The Beautiful, A Widow's Walk. Before we get started with that, I just want to say a couple of things. We are going to be recording this in the hopes that we will be able to put it up on YouTube for people to listen to. So far, that has not happened yet. We've had about 12 talks that are all on my computer, but that is my mission this summer to get that done. So if you are not interested in having your face show up on this, please do feel free to turn off your video. And for anybody that's not sure how to do that, you are welcome to take your cursor to the bottom or top of your screen. And you'll see some icons there. The microphone will mute you. We'll have a Q&A later on, and you'll be able to just click that or click on your face on the screen on the upper right-hand corner. You can also mute and unmute yourself. If you need to get up and walk around or find the best place for you to get internet or something like that in your household, by clicking on the video icon, it will just leave your name up there, but we won't see what's happening in the background there. And during the time, we'll remind people again, when it's time to share, you'll be able to click on the participant button at the bottom of or top of your screen, and there's an option to raise your hand. And that is the easiest way for me to track when there's multiple screens like there are tonight, who it is who would like to speak. So there's Christine. Now you're right next to your mom. That's wonderful. The other thing is there's an opportunity to chat here to me. If you're having any kind of a problem or an issue, please do send a chat. If you click on chat, it will automatically default to everybody in the room, which is fine. And that way, if I miss it, there'll be some volunteers here that can clue me in. And if you have something that you would like to say privately to me, if you hit the little icon that says everyone, my name should come up next, and I'm Susan Barber. So welcome everybody. Diane, I'm so grateful to have you with us this evening. I first became aware, I think, of your book, A Widow's Walk, maybe just after it came out, because we have quite a good relationship with the Adult Day Health Center, and there's some folks from there, and also with senior Coastsiders and a number of people that work at Mission Hospice were talking about your book. And so I think Lynn Syracuse introduced me to your book as well. So I'm so grateful to have you here tonight. I think we'll do about an hour of conversation, or you're talking about the book and your experience, and then we'll open this up for Q&A and let people here that are also participating as listeners first have an opportunity to talk with you. And I'm sure there are many people here who have experienced what you are going to be talking about themselves. So I wanted to just introduce Diane. I became aware of her after hearing about her book, A Widow's Walk. And she is a wonderful artist. She's a longtime resident of the Coastside. She's also a beautiful writer. And and of course, a million other things. And so I talked to Diane before and just said, we'll keep this pretty broad for the introduction, but I want to give Diane a chance to introduce herself to you. And then we'll have a bit of a conversation and have some reading and hear from her book.
Okay, so I'm on. Hi, I just want to say thank you all for being here tonight. This is the first time that I have had a chance to actually present something and talk on a Zoom format. I do like it. I've gone to several meetings and different things with this format, and I'm getting used to it. It's okay. I'm used to the thing where I stand up in front of somebody. I was a musician and played for many, many years, and there's a lot of the exchange between person who's performing and your audience, where you don't get that here, but yet I could see all your faces, and that's even better, actually. So I wanted to throw out this simply to start with, because this is the subject matter, and we are speaking about grief, and that takes in a lot on many, many different levels. Grief is like glitter. You can throw a handful of it up in the air, but when you try to clean it up, you will never get it all. Even long after the event, you will still find glitter tucked in the corners, and it will always be there somewhere. And that has been quite true for me. I am no stranger to grief. And fortunately, I was raised in a family that we could talk a fair amount about what we were feeling like, and it was not brushed in the corners to where I couldn't talk about it. I was married very young, and I had my sweet daughter who's here tonight, and her dad died when he was only 35 years old. At the time, I was only 32, and she was 12. And that was pretty hard because I was pretty young and ill-equipped to deal with that. And I didn't deal with it very well. And the difference between being at that age is that I just wanted to run away from it, get on with my life, and put it behind me. And unfortunately, grief has a way of showing up in your life all over the place if you don't deal with it. And so fast forward, I met my husband, and we met, and we were fast friends and fell in love, and it was the best thing that ever happened. I've been through a divorce. I was widowed prior to that, been through several relationships, and I wasn't very good at it. But this one really triumphed, and we were together for almost 22 years, and it was a very happy union. When he became ill with the cancer, he kept beating it, and we kept thinking that he was going to make it. And he did for a long time. He was quite resilient, and he followed directions. He kept going. And but in 2016, the aggressive cancer, prostate cancer, ended up just taking the best of him, and we finally made the decision to quit all the medications, and then that's when hospice came in, and it was Mission Hospice who treated him and took care of him until he passed away in the middle of November of 2016. Now, that year was a pretty difficult one. My mother died that February. Our dog, who was 15 years old, died in July, and then Ed died in November. The year prior to that, my grandson, my daughter's only child, died at age 23, almost 24, in the beginning of 2015. So there were a lot of deaths from close people in a close proximity of time, and that was pretty difficult to take. You try to recover from one, and then another one comes along and flattens you out, and difficult, very, very difficult. Now, I've been writing for a long time, not writing to where I thought I would write a book someday. I never thought of myself as a writer in that way. I've written many, many songs and a lot of the music, and recorded a lot of that and used that over the years. So I did know how to write, but writing poems and writing poetry and prose is different than writing songs. But I had always kept a journal, and my journal was a way for me to throw my thoughts in there and then read later and realize how far I've come or what I'm still struggling with. And many of these poems that I started writing when Ed got seriously ill, I kept in my journal, and then I started realizing that they were pretty good, and I took them out and started putting them on my computer, and I shared them with people that I knew. And over a period of time, people were starting to tell me that these were good enough that maybe we can put together a book someday. And a good friend of mine who was a writer told me that. And she said, "Now, I don't want that to get in your way. I want you to keep writing and do what you're doing, but I think it's good enough." So I just kept writing, and I would write constantly, because many times I didn't know what my thoughts were and what I was experiencing. So this book, A Widow's Walk, came out of all of that. At the end of the year 2017. After he had died, I wrote all the way through. And then I had at the end of that a pretty good collection of things to write to create a book. And on top of the writing, what I started to do was to draw pictures and paint pictures to go with some of these. I wasn't expecting that to come, but sometimes I would look at a paragraph in one of the poems and I could see something. And so I started to paint what I saw, and they would be accompanying a lot of the poems. So I'm going to read a little bit here from the introduction of this book, and it'll kind of give you an idea of what I've already spoken about, but as an introduction to where this book was going. A Widow's Walk was born out of great pain, and I did not set out to write a book about how to deal with grief. The truth is, I didn't really have a clue as to how to deal with it myself. One day, I found myself in the deep end of the pool, not remembering how to swim. It was then I was forced to tread water and learn to improvise. Early in 2015, my oldest grandson, Nathan, died suddenly. One is never equipped to bury your children, let alone your grandchildren. Watching my only daughter bravely wrestle with the loss of her only child was devastating. I did know the only way to some peace and freedom from the anguish was right through the middle of it, but I had no idea where to go from there. So began this journey. I stayed busy the entire year, coping as best as I could, and the next 10 months passed, and in February of 2016, my mother died. Dad had died 5 years earlier, so with both parents gone, I was at the head of the line, followed closely by one brother. We coped, we grew closer, we did the best we could. During all this time, my wonderful husband had been gallantly dealing with an aggressive cancer that was, bit by bit, chiseling away at him. The thought of losing him was impossible. Caught in my own denial, I kept plodding along, believing with all my heart that he would beat it. I began to write in an attempt to calm my thoughts and deal with the stress. I sought out the help of a couple of grief counselors because I'd hit a wall and I couldn't go forward. It helped. I continued to write. Mid-year, our 15-year-old dog died. For us, it was like losing our child. Life moved on and my husband's need for more care increased. It appeared the cancer was taking the upper hand, and by August, he went off all the meds and signed in with Hospice. By mid-November, he was gone. My whole world, as I had known it, ended. I had written my way through the days just to keep a record for myself of what was happening, what I was feeling, and how it was affecting me. The collection of poems and prose have been a vehicle for my own evolution and change through an arduous passage of time, helping me to heal a little at a time. The truth of it is, I am forever changed. Adjusting to that and accepting things I can't change are what's been in front of me since Ed's passing. One step at a time and staying in the moment as well as I can has brought me to where I am today. I'm not cured and I won't get over it. The good news is I can live within the parameters that life's events have brought me. I have come a long way from where I was in the early days, and as with any recovery, it's best not to measure things by how far I have to go. The words I have written here have helped me profoundly, and it is my hope that they will help others as well. Working through grief is nothing new. We will all have to face loss eventually, and will grieve in our own personal ways. However, the one thing that has made it all bearable is the knowledge that I am not alone on this path. It takes great courage to face the emotional pain of loss, and I hope you will find some comfort in these pages. So, as I said, I began to write, and in the beginning, the first few poems of the book are through the first year, and they're spanned over several months until he passed away. I started writing quite a bit toward the end, and then after he passed, I wrote constantly. But being faced with someone's eventual end is a difficult thing. You don't want it to be there. Denial is huge. And the first one that I wrote was he and I had taken a trip down to Pacific Grove for our 20th anniversary. And we were sitting in bed. He was reading and I was writing. And it suddenly occurred to me that this might be our last anniversary together. And as it turned out, it was. And the first thing that I wrote here, and I included that in the book, was a lot of times the things that catch me and help me to get back on the rails, as it were, is perspective. Just looking at something a little bit differently. It's a trick of the light sometimes. And this one is called perspective shift. He sleeps while my heart weeps. How does this come to be? I watch him breathe and my thoughts weave a maze of tangled fear. I cannot fathom life without him, the coming and goings of him, the sound of him walking, talking, and laughing, the music of my heart. How does one stay within the parameters of what is and not fall between the cracks of the what ifs? I want to turn away from this impending sadness. Only seeing his very present smile, let me find a comforting peace and walk along this part of the road without fear and trepidation, finding the grace in my efforts to seek it out. I'm found. He's here. We move on. I'm going to go right into this next one, which is called Suspended. And this was the first one that I wrote, or I drew a picture, because there is one of the captions or one of the little paragraphs here, a picture came into my head and that's what I included. And that was the beginning of starting to illustrate some of these poems. Time has stood still. The blur of life flies by like the speed of light, and I wonder where I am. I don't seem to know how to move forward or back. There is no up or down here to indicate space. Gravity has left me, and I am suspended as if in a strange dream of slowness, where movement has stalled, as if the inevitability of what is to come has abated time to wait so I can adjust, if possible. Each moment that passes is like a capsule, a bubble. I am inside floating, watching, waiting. I have been fractured into small pieces of me, each going through their day in syncopated efficiency, observing from another world, seeing with other eyes. This is still me and you, being what we've always been. And I don't know if this will show up well, but this is the picture of me in a bubble. And that's how I felt, just trapped inside that. Are there anything else you wanted me to talk about there, Susan, as we're going along here?
Well, first, just thank you so much for sharing that beautiful poem and all of your writing there. You know, that sense of being, yes, I see some people up there who are cheering. I think this experience that you're describing, the words that you're using to describe this experience of being dislocated in your own life is just such an accurate description of what it's like when somebody that's been an anchor or your beloved is no longer physically here for that anchoring. And I just appreciated that so much. I know that when we were talking about this, you had also, and you mentioned earlier, that in your very first marriage, your husband also died at a very young age, and you had a 12-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Then years later, her own son died. And, you know, this experience of having a death, which it sounds to me in terms of how you and she, or you chose to navigate that, was very different than I was talking with you earlier about a death that in my family, where my family didn't really believe in death. So somebody died and it was just over. It was just the way they dealt with it. So when my grandmother died, our first death that I remember at 7, it was a big deal that day that she died. And then the next day, there was just never a conversation about her again. And if we brought her up, it was just, and years later, almost 50 years later, actually, I was with my mother clearing out her house. She was about to move, downsize. And when I arrived in Kentucky, she had a photograph out of her sister, which was a shock to our family because up until then, we thought she was an only child. And she was 86. And she said to me, this is my sister who died when I was 6. She was my best friend. She was 19 years older than me, and she came to take me to the beach one day and had a fight with my mother, your grandmother, went home and killed herself. And I never spoke about it. I said I was just shocked. And I said, who have you told about this? Because she was sobbing. And she said, oh, I told your father on our wedding day, but we never spoke of it again. So I was raised in a family where these experiences of deep emotional shifting and loss were really encouraged and modeled to be shoved down, which of course for all of my 4 siblings and myself, that led us down lots of different roads. And for me, very gratefully, I landed at end of life where we talk and deal with grief, and finally able to deal with my own grief. And I am always just so grateful to hear other stories, which I think your daughter's story is, from the very beginning of the death of your first husband. It feels to me like you faced that head on, and that there were conversations. This wasn't just somebody just disappeared from your life and then the next day happened. And I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about that. I don't believe that helps with the next devastating loss that you might have, but I feel like there's a path that you're on, and you may know that it will be dark and possibly some light will come again if you've had an experience of this once. That
Well,
makes any sense at all.
yeah, it does. I will say that, and I said that earlier, is when her dad died, we didn't have the relationship that I had with my latest husband.
Yes.
But I loved him very much. We were married we were kids, so who knows anything about being married or having children or anything. We just kind of grew up together. And of course, we were like a couple of kids when things went wrong. He didn't speak to me. He came from a family that didn't talk, and I came from a family who wanted to. So I was like the nagging little yappy dog at his feet all the time, and that made him worse. So but there was a great deal of caring and love, and of course the focus of that love was our daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's safe to say that she felt loved all the time, especially from her dad, from both of us, really. But how I dealt with it when he finally passed away was, we talked about it. I talked about it with my daughter, but I don't think that I gave it the attention she probably needed. I tried to be as supportive as I could, but I was like somebody pulled the rug out from underneath me, and I did not know what I was dealing with. And I don't think I did a great job, to be honest with you. I think now she has told me, oh, well, you did the best you could. And yes, that's probably true, but even the best I could wasn't very good at the time. But what I have learned over the years is that you can always try and make up for those things. You can't undo the past. And actually, knowing that, I look back on it and I think, well, if I had known better, I would have done better. I truly would have. But I had a lot of other things going on, not making excuses. That was just simply the way it was. But she and I were always very, very close. And we became closer because she and I were all we had. was each other, and became very close, and through the years have been. I think that she has been the kind of person, I've always told her that she was an old soul, and has helped me actually through the years, and her dealing with the death of her son. I'm quite amazed at her resiliency. I mean, that is always going to be a wound. That's just the way it is. You don't lose a child and have that all heal up and it's over. You just can't. But she has dealt with it with such grace that I have great admiration for her and for the way that she's come through it. And now that, fast forward these years later, she has come home to live with me, which is perfect at this time of our lives, particularly through this pandemic and everything around that. It was just time. She's helped me to deal with what I'm dealing with. And of course, she was very close to my husband. He was her stepdad, and she loved him, and he loved her. And so that was another big loss. She's losing another father. And but we've always talked about it. And one of the things that has always driven me crazy is if people are in a group and someone's talking about what they're feeling and they're crying, and suddenly everybody runs for the Kleenex and dumps it on somebody's lap. And now that has always driven me nuts, because it's like it's an interruption of their grief and their expression. And I think we want to fix it. I think most people are very uncomfortable with someone else's grief unless they're dealing with it themselves. So it's important, I think, for both of us to let each other have our feelings. When we cry, and we ask each other, is it okay? Do you want anything from me, or can I just let you sit there and feel your feelings? And that really works. I think it's been very good for us.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to witness. And I don't know that we can do much more for another person that's really in grief than to let them know that we're here, that we hear them, that we're witnessing this. They're not alone in this space. I trained hospice volunteers for many years, and from my mentor learned, if somebody is crying, often our first thing, we want to like put our hand on them and pat their back, which is saying to them, please stop crying because you're making me so uncomfortable. I can't bear it. And certainly that was the way I was raised. It was like, no crying here. So to hear that story, that permission to really let your feelings just be whatever they are, and to have a space for both of you to just go into them. I think it's pretty clear to me at this point in my life that they're not going anywhere, and we can either go with them or they're just going to be waiting for us while we divert our attention in other ways. And I think that's so beautiful. I'm also curious in that, when your first husband died, were you writing then? Was that part of your process at that point?
Not at all.
Just making your way through the day and getting to the next day.
I journal. I did keep a journal, so that I did have that, but no, I didn't write my way through anything.
Yeah. And so that sounds like it changed a lot in the 20 years or more between, more than that. And so did the writing just start happening, Diane, for you? The journaling is, a particular kind of writing, and then it looks, like then these other sort of these poems, and you've sent me some beautiful prose writing. Did that just start happening for you, or?
Yeah, it did. Actually, it started to take form in much the same way as when I started writing songs, because I had performed and played guitar. That was part of my way I supported myself, is I played in restaurants and did all kinds of things with my guitar and sang. And I had developed a nodule on my vocal cords and I couldn't sing. I had to have that removed. And during that period of time, I started writing songs. They just started coming and I couldn't stop it. So when I started to write this kind of poetry and prose, it was like I'd get a thought or an idea, it was different. It's hard to explain it. It was different than anything else that I had. And it was like a light bulb went on and said, we have to be written about. And I would sit down and it would just come out. And there it was. So that's what happened with these poems and this prose. It just started coming, and it would happen in the middle of the night too. So yeah, it was a definite steady stream of stuff that came,
That's
which I'm
amazing.
grateful for.
Yes.
I wanted to read one here. It was called Passages, and I actually read it at his memorial. And I wrote it because I started to notice the changes that were going on in the household. Like, we had always had breakfast at the breakfast table. We have a little nook in there. We didn't do that anymore because he didn't really want to sit at the table. He wanted to be out either on the couch or on our window seat. So all of that changed. And the things that he did on a regular basis, they weren't happening anymore. And so this was written actually about a little over a month before he passed away. And I called it Passages. The kitchen table and chairs are empty now, leaving behind the memories of what transpired there. A worn-out old pillow sits idle where you often sat, working in the garden, the old dog poking around nearby, then choosing to lie in the sun beside you until you were done. The driveway, now vacant of your little green truck, where in the window often sat two furry, white, happy little faces. Morning cups of coffee carried out to the hot tub where we'd spend time making plans of what to do and where to go next. Our lives so intertwined with love and happy times, changed and made to hang precariously of late, as we walk into this chapter of uncertainty. Happiness, a daily decision not dependent on circumstance, but predicated on all we have had and still have. My state of mind is a constant evolving thing, taking every effort to maintain to stay on course, giving way to those occasional but inevitable times when tears must be allowed to fall. Watching leaves wither now, turning from their vibrant green to red to brown, then fall to the ground and blow away. Moving into the seasons when pumpkins adorn the fields, then give way to the endless rows of dark green Christmas trees. This time of the year that I've always loved so, filled with the memories of years past, like watching from behind a large picture window. The time passes by and activities and events unfold before me. I am here inside simply observing it all, not venturing forward to step into the midst of it, making the attempts remaining here in my own space where decisions are my own and not made for me in my absence. For now, the festive seasons may remain packed away in their boxes, the possibility of their emerging only a thought. For the time being, I will reflect on the things that participate the oncoming yearly celebrations. You are here as well as you are able to be. Each day I observe your quiet inner contemplation, your own private thoughts, remembering perhaps, wondering, maybe just moments of unmeasured peace. Precious this time we have. Beyond and apart from earthly dictations, what truly matters now is not what we see and touch and hear, so much as what we know profoundly as our own truth. Life moves forward as it always has and always will. We choose to flow with it or fight with ferocity against it. In the end, it will always prevail. It does not end when stepping across the borderline into the everything of forever. I am standing here seeing what is and what is becoming, finding the courage to let the river take you on to where I know not, only knowing that in time you will depart. Then one day in some not too far off fall morning, Perhaps I may take leave of here and meet you there, and as lovers and friends do, take up where we left off, to walk down the path into the colors of the day.
Oh,
Sorry, that one always gets to me.
that I can absolutely understand why. It's just so you're so present in your the very specific things that made your life with him just so beautiful, and to be able to share that in such a full way. Um, I was so struck about the happiness is a decision, not really connected to the circumstances of one's life. And that just stopped me in my tracks. I feel like that's such a, I don't know if there's a secret key to unlock the door of getting through deep grief or just life. Like that to me seems to be it. That this is, that we can make decisions in our lives about what direction, what we're aiming towards. And also this idea of I loved your description of being in a sort of place of stillness where you're, kind of the observer of what's happening, but you're making your own decisions. They're not being made for you or forced on you.
Mhm.
Um, and it made me wonder if you have sort of a stillness practice or a meditation practice, or if that's just a natural place that you go to be, still and observing. It's just, and the whole piece was just so overwhelming with beauty and the deep sadness of what you're both anticipating and you can articulate so well.
Thank you for that. As far as meditation, I've never been very good at that. But then I have to say that probably the meditation, if it's called that, and if it's what I do, is when I get into a zone like this
Mm.
and write. It is a meditation
Oh,
of sorts.
yeah.
When I'm creating anything, I've started creating little things like this little bear.
It's
um,
beautiful.
I just start doing that, and it gets into a zone, and it's very meditative. It's like that's where I find my peace, and I have to go there often. It's become a discipline through the years, and it's because I can get pulled in any direction, particularly right now with what is going on worldwide. It's very easy for me to get yanked in any different direction and jump on some cause or something. But I have to remember that right now that is not what is going to feed me. What is going to feed me is to know my own truth, and that is evident when I'm creating. So that's what I need to do. And I think that's my contribution, if you will, to life right now. I don't know where life is going, but that's my contribution to it.
There was
So
also, thank you for sharing that. This had a sense, and maybe because you may have articulated this in a much better way, that where life is going, that is really sort of up to life itself, that it has a momentum and it's sort of forward moving, and we can try to sort of fight that, or we can allow ourselves to be part of that process. And I think that's also one of the things that really struck me in the last piece you read, is the description of how you allow yourself to go into that process and just the fighting it. Sure, there are moments, but it doesn't seem to be a stance you're taking in this way of navigating your grief.
doing the best I can. um, there was one thing that I wanted to share with you too is, and you've probably come across this because of your work. And anyone who is joining us tonight who has been through this process and this passage of watching someone you love eventually make their way to the next adventure, as Ed used to say, I'm going on my next adventure. The whole process of dying is very puzzling to those of us who are left to watch it. And I wrote something called The Closing, and I would like to share it with you now because it's very, very important, I think, when we are working with or observing and being with somebody who is making their way out, to understand as much as we can that it's a lot of work to die.
Indeed.
And sometimes the best thing we can do is to allow a person to die, just like allow someone to grieve, allow people to have their emotions and their feelings and everything. But when they are dying, they're about their business. That's all I can say. So this is called The Closing. My thoughts often stray back to the time when you were preparing to leave this world, a very different matter than packing your things to take with you on a trip somewhere. In this case, there's nothing to bring. All is left behind, everything. And so I watched, helpless and forsaken, unable to help you with your preparation, for none of it would include me this time. The biggest journey of your life, and I couldn't go. I could only observe and wait, and then I would remain behind. This process of disconnecting, pulling the plugs, turning out the lights, the realization that I couldn't stop it, yet wanting to assist in this rite of completion. I was powerless to do anything but witness its ultimate sacred holiness. The multitude of emotions in utter chaos ran about inside me with frantic confusion. Was I witnessing the withdrawal of love? My heart screamed mournfully for validation, something from you to tell me that you were not leaving me, but simply going somewhere else. There is a difference, I insisted, and I needed to know, wanted to hear, just one more time, those words of love, just for me, one more time, for me, for me. But even in this tumult and blind bewilderment, I would hear your voice, constant above the din, what you'd always told me. Proof was everywhere. What was here in the middle of this flood of tears was the howling child simply wanting comfort.
Mm.
While you were about the important business of dying, the immense effort it took to finish your time here and then to move on, to simply move on. So my queries of where is love, is it gone, were not relevant, the truth being that love never went anywhere. In fact, my mending heart now hears the constant evidence of your love. It has been important for me to realize your detachment from this life held no elements of abandonment. What it showed me was the true miracle of the melding of soul to body in the first place, and then the parting and ending of that union. I could only stand by and behold in awe how such a harsh and seemingly cruel act of nature would ultimately yield such a glorious end in another of life's many dichotomies. At the time you're leaving, though imminent, seemed impossible to face and then accept. Now it has found itself written upon the pages of my life for me to read from time to time and remember, much the same as when suffering the pains of childbirth, the presence of the newborn erases all of it with joy. So the sorrow that accompanied your departure has been tempered with the passing of time, and the bitter goodbye has become till we meet again. So,
So yes to all of that. And yes, this is something certainly that many of us who work in hospice get to see, observe, and witness. And also for me, I work in hospice because I had that experience myself with my beloved and many other friends, but that was the most difficult. this understanding that love in some way was going to continue, that was not something that death was going to be able to remove, but to be able to trust during that death process, to trust that. Because I feel like that was what guided every step of the way, and continues all these years later to be part of what guides my life. It sounds like for you also, this task of separation, such an intense separation from the beloved, and then also this weird thing like, well, there's nowhere they're not now. And
Right.
how do we walk through this plane that we all find ourselves on that's very much about being solid and in 3D, where the love of the beloved is also still with us. And for many, the task of grief might be, the most difficult task of grief might be trying to navigate that stretch between, we are all very attached to the physical body and the physical bodies of our beloveds, and that is clearly not happening once the person dies. But there's so many other parts that are continuing, and I wonder if you're comfortable or if you've written anything about this ongoing relationship of love with somebody who has died.
Well, when you said that, it reminded me many, many years ago when I used to do sing at weddings, and I sung at memorials and all of that. One of my favorite people to do those with was a man who was he'd been a monk at one time.
Mhm.
Then he became a priest. Then he left the priesthood and married a lady and raised her kids with her. And he was a teacher up at the college in Fremont where I used to live. And I've taken classes with him, and he was quite wonderful. But one of the things I remember him saying at memorials was, when a person dies, you will have a relationship with them that will be absolutely wonderful, a different relationship entirely, but it will be very rich if you allow yourself to have that. And I have found that to be true. In the beginning, now, when I was consumed with the grief of losing my husband, I had a hard time. Oh, sorry, that was my puppy. I was having a hard time getting in touch with that or even allowing that space. However, one of the first nights, my daughter had come. She was living in Florida at the time. She came out to stay with me. She was out in the living room, and I said, I think I'm going to go in and just soak in a bathtub. So I did that. And as I was sitting there and just feeling consumed with utter grief, and I thought, I don't think I could stand this. I'm not going to be able to get through this at all.
Right.
And I got out and I sat wrapped up in a towel on the edge of the tub. And all of a sudden, it was like the room lit up. I don't know whether it did or not, but it felt like it. And I felt myself absolutely embraced. And it was the most wonderful, warm feeling. And I took a deep breath and I said, oh my gosh, you're here. And I went out in the living room after that and I told Christine, I said, he's here. And she said, I was wondering when you were going to notice that. She's always been very perceptive of things like that. But it was like he's been here off and on, and I feel him, and I talk to him often. He left on the night of the supermoon, when that incredible moon lit up the sky. And right about that time, as the moon was rising, he took his last breath. And one of his sons happened to be here, and he came in the door and he said, you wouldn't believe the moon that's in the sky. And it's like the moon just shone its rays and just welcomed him up. And
Wow.
I mean, it's the metaphors and all the visuals of all of that have been just wonderful. And I have written a number of poems about the moon. And every time it comes full, I go out in the yard and I talk to him. We have conversations all the time, but yeah, I don't know whether I got off track there, but it's the relationship is there,
Yes.
and it there's nothing like a face-to-face and feeling the person. That's the thing we miss most as
Yes.
human beings. But you can have a relationship that is beyond that, because they are part of the everything now in my feelings about it. They're always around me, and I feel that very
Yes.
definitely.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's kind of, I mean, and I know that's not true for everybody, but I feel for, there's so many people that I've talked with about this kind of loss. This is true for them. And it's kind of like one of the things you can't really say in polite company, like, well, my beloved is also here with me. I've been with friends who have mentioned, like, boy, it feels like Bob is really here. And I'll be like, yes, isn't that interesting? So thank you for sharing that. For anybody out there that feels like, if I really just lost my mind, no. And I wonder, if you have anything that might, for somebody who's newly bereaved and really looking at just that, in that place of feeling so weighted down and just so lost. I'm wondering if there's anything that you might have written about that experience.
yeah, there's one here that I called Dull Gray, and I actually had done an illustration of it.
Would love
And
to see some of those illustrations too.
yeah, if I can show you this little picture of
Uh-huh.
this person just shrouded in a like a veil, and
Yes.
knees bunched up and hugging myself. That's how I felt.
Mhm.
Just that's where I wanted to be, just um, cloistered. Some days I feel as though I must have died myself, and I'm waiting in a long line going God knows where. I can't say it's really horrible here, just dull and dead. Like all the color faded from the world, not even black and white, just a tired brown color, like the old photographs of the Dust Bowl. There's no incentive to do much, so I let a few tears fall. At least that lets me know I still exist. When they stop, I don't know what I am or where I am or why I'm here. Nothing much matters anymore. I feel like throwing something at somebody, but who? Besides, I haven't the energy and no desire to actually do it. So it remains a passing thought, and then I forget and stare into nothing again. Today I began the day with a little sleep, though to find refuge in slumber is difficult, understanding that the lack of it contributes to the very dark places I visit. I suppose I should take this all into careful consideration and not let it sink the ship. It is, after all, just a part of the journey. And I had days after days like that of just feeling like I was going nowhere, and I didn't think that I could possibly recover from crying. But in time, that did go by. But writing about it and then reading what I had written was helpful. And that's why I think books like this are important if you don't write, to read. There's one of learning to surviving the loss of a loved one.
Mm.
I think that's been around for a long time, and it helped me through a divorce. It's helped me through death. It's helped me through a lot of things, because you feel validated by words that are written, and somebody says, well, I'm feeling all those feelings, but I don't know how to put them into words. And then when you do read them, it's like, oh, thank you.
Yes.
So
It's really a gift.
mm,
Yeah.
it is a gift. It's a gift to me to be able to give back, and I feel that very strongly. I continue to write. As a matter of fact, I've been writing ever since, and I thought, well, maybe I'll do another book. I don't know whether that's going to come around, but I do share them with people that I know. So if there's anyone in this audience that wants to get my mailing or my email, they're welcome to it. And if they'd like me to share things when I do have them, I will be happy to do that. I don't know how to do a blog. I'm not that technically oriented, but
Do you keep an email list of people's names?
I do.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So perhaps what I'm going to do, Diane, later tonight, we'll be sending an evaluation out to everybody with some resources. We'll include your email address on there.
Okay.
And then people can email you directly, and if they may need a poem or they may need a piece of prose.
Yeah.
And I also just want to acknowledge, because you shared this with me the other day, that one of your dearest friends just last week died unexpectedly. It sounds like unexpectedly. And that you shared with me a beautiful piece that you had written. And I just want to say thank you so much for still being willing to show up here and to talk about grief while you're in the middle of your own grief again. And I think it feels just so reassuring that this is hard work. It's really hard to get through these sorts of experiences and, you know, to really absorb them, not just to push them away, but to really allow the full expression of grief, because it's the full expression of love and loss. And I feel like this is so reassuring for people to know there's a way through here, and this experience can also bring forth some great beauty. These poems and what you're sharing, this writing is just beautiful. And it's hard to imagine that out of such great loss and sorrow, that such beautiful things can also emerge. So
That is quite amazing. Yeah.
yes.
I will read this little poem that I wrote for my friend Sue, who I've known for over 20 years, and she lived in England, and it was quite a feat that we kept the friendship alive that way, but for such distance. But we did travel a lot together, and she died suddenly of a pulmonary embolism, and just took her too early. But anyone who's had a friend or someone close to them would be able to relate to this. It's called One More Goodbye. Another door closed today, quietly, firmly, sadly. I stood on this side of it, knowing I could not pass. Once more, a boat sailed off, leaving me behind. I did not even have the chance to say goodbye. A little ceramic heart hangs on my bedpost next to me. Friends for life, it says, and I'm grateful we have been. More than 2 decades, we kept a friendship alive in spite of the miles between us, in spite of everything. We were so different, and it's so very much the same. I had no qualms about being completely me with you. You seem to have had the same freedoms with me. The times we have shared are precious, and I will miss them. It seems as the days go by, I am surrounded by my past. Memories hang on walls and up on shelves for me to find, like wandering through halls of an old museum with its relics to observe and remember their history. Realizing life is about change and many corners turned, each one I go round offers a new vista, a new adventure. After a while, I desire a straight and constant road ahead. No turns, no more hills and valleys, and no more adventures. Maybe I'm just feeling that way tonight because you're gone, and I know that I will be missing you, wishing we could talk. Truth be told, one-sided conversations are just not the same. Hard to talk through a closed door, hard to say goodbye again.
So beautiful.
So did I lose your sound?
No, Alexa just reminded me that we were going to have this meeting.
Okay.
But that's, I just really, Diane, thank you so much for sharing that. And, this growing old, as my friend who was, I think, 90 when she first said it to me, growing old, this ain't for sissies. As, friend after friend of hers died. And she was wise enough to always have younger friends. But, these deaths of our friends and partners, and this constant sort of need to learn to let go again is just so hard. And you just can articulate the emotional space that takes up. And in such a beautiful way, and while you're right in the middle of this. So I'm seeing it's 8 o'clock, and I'm wondering just a couple of things before we open this up. I wonder what has surprised you the most about this process of working through or letting. I always laugh when people are like, "Oh, so you're working through your grief." I'm like, "No, my grief is working me over." Is what it's actually more accurate. But kind of what surprised you most about this process?
Um, how it has changed me, I think. I don't think that I was expecting that I would be so profoundly changed. I've I've always been an introvert, even though I've done extrovert type of activities in my life. I prefer my own company in solitude, and I would. It takes a lot to pull myself out to be with people, and I don't like crowds at all. So this is really kind of nice to be here. Um, but I have found, and I don't know whether this is perhaps age that has done this, because I'm now past the 70. I'm at 72 to my last birthday, and I'm thinking, how did I get there? But hey, um, I think getting older, one begins to realize that there's an awful lot of things in life that really don't matter so much.
Mhm.
And I'm much less inclined to let people and things waste my time, because I think maybe I treasure it so much. And perhaps the passing of people that I have loved makes me more inclined to call them up and say, "What are you doing? I love you. I'm glad you're in my life." Um, I think slowing down, and I don't know that I would have necessarily slowed down just because I've gotten older, but this process has definitely done that.
Yeah.
Another kind of fringe benefit is remaining in the moment. Um, I have my worst anguish when I throw myself far out in front of my path
Mm.
and start entertaining thoughts like, what if this and what if that? And because I can't do anything about that, I'm not even there. When you're watching someone die and you're taking care of them, you cannot go any further than what's right in front of you. You have to take care of that right now. That practice has kept me there, and I am very uncomfortable if I get too far out in front of myself. So perhaps the fact that I've actually been able to be disciplined enough to stay there, that surprises me,
Mm.
because typically I've not been that kind of person. I've always gone 100 miles an hour.
Yes.
And I have a daughter who is just the opposite, and she looks at me sometimes like, she'll tell me, Mom, you're making me tired just looking at you. So I've gotten to the point where I don't do that so much anymore. I'm getting better at it. And I think having her here has helped me a lot with
Mm.
that. So yeah, maybe that's what. And they're all good beneficial things, actually. They're
Yes.
yeah, I can see life better. I notice things. I notice the things that really matter.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, I think that maybe this would be a good time to open up for questions. It's just so beautifully said. I think of my friends that are Buddhist monks that sit in Irkutis and in caves and all sorts of places for decades trying to arrive in the present moment. And you've articulated that experience so beautifully. If anybody has anything they'd like to say or would like to raise their hand, the easiest way to do that for me to track who wants to say something, and please know that if your video is on and we're recording this and it goes up on YouTube, then your face would also be on the YouTube. If you click on the participants button, and then you'll be able to raise your hands, and I will start tracking people that would like to share. I can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself at that point. Or even if without a question, if there's just something that you want to acknowledge or share an experience of your own, this would be a wonderful time for that. Donnie Davis, thank you. And Donnie, let's see.
Oh, wow. Diane, thank you. That was so profound. My husband died not quite 2 years ago. We were married for 50 years.
Wow.
So much of what you said really resonated because I also watched him on his final journey. There was a line in the closing that I started to write down and didn't catch the end of it that just really grabbed me. It says, detachment held no something.
Let me find it. Oh. Oh. Your detachment from this life held no elements of abandonment.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
That just was such a wonderful line.
Yes.
That was a big light bulb that went on for me when I realized that. It was helpful. Oh, I'm glad.
And then there was another line about, I put it in the chat, about, let's see, presence. Let's see, where is that?
Seasons wrapped up. Oh, you put up seasons wrapped up like packages.
Yeah.
Oh, that must have been passages.
Yeah, that was,
Yes.
I love that image. Your imagery is exquisite.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is for now. The festive seasons may remain packed away in their boxes.
Mm-hmm.
The possibility of their emerging only a thought. For the time being, I will reflect on the things that participate.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And Diane, we have a question from Mukund. He says, could you tell us about the joy you find in the process of writing and creating?
I think the joy comes from, well, actually, I get a sense of amazement that I actually did that. And I think, where is that coming from? Because I'll get like I said, I'll get a noodle of a thought, and it keeps nudging me, and then I'll start writing or typing, and it just flows out. And I don't censor it as it's coming out. I mean, I can go back and edit, but as it's coming out, and then I get to the very end of it and reread that, I just think, my gosh, where did that come from? I don't know whether that sounds funny but it happens every time, and I just feel joyful, like, oh, thank you for letting me be this recipient or this vessel or whatever it is for this to come through, because it's helping me a whole lot. And so I get excited about it and want to share it with people, but I have to be kind of careful because not everybody wants to jump on and talk about death and grief and stuff. So in the beginning, I think most of my friends were a little bit more tolerant of me because I was going through that. But as time goes by, not everybody wants to hear about it. They well, aren't you over that yet? I don't think they mean that cruelly, but it's true. Life goes on, the world goes way ahead of me, and I'm back here still trying to process this whole thing. So I have to keep that in perspective. But yeah, there is the joy of just the creation of it. It's exciting.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And Gabby has her hand up. Gabby, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, Diane.
Hi, I can't see you. Where are you? I want to see you.
I'm probably a little dark in here. The light.
Okay.
Obviously, I've read your book, and for those who have not it's kind of a gift of two, because her words, of course, are incredibly poetic and deep and personal and intimate, and she invites you in to a time that was very vulnerable and fragile for her. So her words are incredibly beautiful, but the artwork is so lovely. And you didn't get a chance to show that, obviously, but I encourage everyone to read this, because I think that you write it for your own healing, but in many ways you tap into different parts of each of us going through something that might be completely different, and yet the words speak so clearly to us. So I just want to say thank you for publishing it, because when I first met you, you were in the process of it. And it's a beautiful book, and you should be incredibly proud. And I just really enjoyed hearing you read them out loud and to share your heart with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. I appreciate that so much. I was going to put this up on the screen. This is one I talked about, the moon, and this is one that I did of an angel holding the moon. Welcoming them.
Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Anybody else have anything that they would like to share, or a question about the process of writing or the contents? Yes, thank you. Donnie is asking a question that I was going to ask also. Diane, can you tell people, and I'll include this in the resource email that goes out after this, but if somebody would like to purchase your book, would the best way to do that be to get hold of your email and email you?
That's right.
Yes. Great.
Yeah, I think I gave you all the particulars there. It's $19.95 plus tax and shipping. So, and checks and whatever is taken. But yeah, and I'll pack it up and send it to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. This is the part that's also hard. If you were at Mission Hospice, or we were on the coast for the author series, you would just have them there and people could just get them right away.
Right.
Right. Anybody else have anything that they would want to put up in the chat? Lots of beautiful comments here in the chat about peaceful and calming. Yes. Thank you for sharing so deeply and so beautifully. I've been very moved and will reflect on much of what you've shared. Yeah, I think that you have a lot of folks here who are navigating sort of that same space of the loss of their beloved, and just having some words of, I feel like little signposts along the way for somebody that might be a little bit further out from that experience can be so helpful to people. Chuck, I see that you have unmuted yourself. Do you want to ask a question?
No, just wanted to tell you, Karen had her hand up a couple of times.
Okay, I'm looking here at the hands that, thank you, Chuck. I'm just looking at the hands that I see here. Karen, would you like to say something? And just feel free to unmute yourself.
There,
Thank you.
Okay, I am now unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So my first encounter with your book was when my daughters came to visit me for the Yahrzeit, the year out from my husband's death. We were in Half Moon Bay and walking along the ocean and doing lovely things together, and went into some of the shops. That's where my daughter Catherine found your book and bought it on the sly and gave it to me in the gallery. And I was so moved by it. We've been corresponding, and I know that I have bought copies of it for a number of friends who have found themselves in the same situation. And each time it's just such a wonderful gift for them. And it was a great pleasure to meet you on screen here in person and to hear you read your poetry, because it is profound. It is beautiful.
Oh,
thank you. Nice to put a face to a name now.
Take care.
Thank you, Karen. And Yeah, Chuck, if you see any other hands up, please let me know, because the way I have my screen set up, in case that we get to put this up somewhere, is that Diane is the primary screen that I'm seeing, and I'm just looking to see if the participants have put their little blue hands up by using the participant button. So if there's other people who are just putting their hands up like this, just let me know. And you're welcome to just unmute yourself if that's your situation. Anybody else?
Diane,
Yes.
Yes.
sweet lady. In listening to you talk and speak the words, it's so much different than reading them myself. As you know, I knew Ed, and I miss him dearly. He was such a quiet, gentle giant. And having known you from Crescio, and to see the whole circle come around, you're amazing, beautiful young lady. Thank you for your courage.
Thank you, Chuck.
Beautiful, Chuck. Thank you.
Susan, there's a question from, I can't pronounce the person's name, Mojay?
Oh, yeah.
How do you, this is to you, Diane. How do you recommend getting through second guessing yourself? The should have, could haves.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, talking about how I could have dealt with my first husband's death a little bit better, it takes a while to forgive yourself for things that you've done amiss. We all can do the I shoulda, coulda, woulda, and never gets you anywhere. And there are times when I've thought about how I could have done things a little better when Ed was dying, and maybe I could have been a little bit more patient. Maybe I could have, I don't know, I could have done things differently. In hindsight, you always have 20/20, and you always think, well, I could have done that a little bit better, and I wish I could have done it better. But first of all, that has never gotten me anywhere except more grief. And it's not a bad thing to scrutinize where we've been and what we've done and what we could have done better. And hopefully in times to come, maybe I will do it better if I'm in that same situation again. But for right now, I have to understand one thing, and I do understand this, that all there is, and this is my own philosophy, but all there is love. And when we leave this body of ours, that's what we are. We're love. And love only is kind and all those wonderful things, kind and considerate and loving and forgiving and all of that. So I can only think that when I get into, I should have done things differently, and I'm sorry, Ed, and he's saying to me, you did the best you could, and you did a darn good job. I remember one night he was laying on the couch and I was perched on the end of it looking at him, and his son was there. He was reading to him, and Ed looked at me across the end of the couch and he said, come here. And I walked over to him and he put his hands on my face and he said, you are my love always. So whenever I get into a place of thinking that I could have done more, I remember that. And I also look at where I am and how I am taken care of. All of that was an act of love. So remember the good stuff, because we could always do better, because that's part of being human. But we did the best we could. That's the best I could say for that.
Thank you, Diane. Marguerite has herself unmuted. Marguerite, did you want to share something or ask a question or?
Oh, wow. I didn't realize I was unmuted, actually, but.
Hi, Marguerite.
Hello, Diane, and hello, Christy. I guess the only thing I've been thinking, I wasn't going to hop up and say this, but the thing I've been thinking during this is how fortunate you were to have that great love.
Mm-hmm.
I've made lousy decisions as my life has gone by, and I have never experienced a great love like you and Ed had. And I know how much it tears you up, how much you miss him. And I feel for you, believe me. But you're so blessed to have had that.
Mm-hmm. Very definitely.
Yes.
And every time I talk to you or hear you, I think you were such a wonderful couple. And I wish I had had a chance to know him.
Yes, me too.
And when I see people, I hear about people like you and Ed, it gives me hope for the future. That people can do this right. So, thank you for setting such a great example for the rest of us.
Thank you, Marguerite, for checking in from Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world. In fact, I was visiting a friend and I was at a supermarket just picking up a couple things I really needed. And there's a torrential downpour. I came home soaking wet and barely got on time, but I would not have missed this, Diane. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you for being here. Good to see you.
Lovely to see you as well.
Thank you, Marguerite. Anybody else? Anybody else out there before we conclude for the evening here? It looks like we've covered what's in the chat. If anybody else wants to share, you're welcome to just unmute yourself at this point instead of raising hands. It's too late for that. Thank you. Yeah, Diane, it looks like Dawn, it looks like you've unmuted yourself. If you'd like to say anything. Thank you.
Oh, I just want to say how remarkable my cousin is. And I've known her since she was a little tiny baby. And she's just grown into the most beautiful and gifted person. And I'm so happy for what you've learned along the way and how observant you are and willing to share with others. And God bless you.
Thank you, Dawn. Love you.
My sweet cousin. Our moms were sisters.
Oh,
Yep.
so sweet.
I'm very proud of my cousin.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yes, and my name is Lynn, and I would just love to say how grateful I am to have Diane here on the coast and in my life, that I get to see her and her beautiful daughter, Christy, and their lovely dog, Bingo. And I've been blessed with being able to listen to Diane's writings. Oh, there he is. There's Bingo.
Oh, buddy. Hello.
Yeah. He's a good
celebrating pride.
Celebrating pride. Yay, Bingo.
Oh, hi. Hi, Bingo.
Go for it, Lynn. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I've just felt so grateful to have the opportunity to hear a lot of what Diane writes, and there are many of us that are on her email that get to read it, and I've never. I mean, sometimes it's just so profound to me because I don't have the words to articulate they come from just such a deep well, and they touch me to my core. And so I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much.
Can I also, Lynn, is it true that, or is it you and Carrie your You offer a grief support group on the coast. Is that correct, Diane? And which is now accessed virtually?
This was a 8-week curriculum.
Yes.
Resilience.
Yes.
Support group. And then the pandemic happened and we couldn't continue with the curriculum. So we've been meeting, and it was supposed to end after 8 weeks.
Oh.
Yeah,
and it just hasn't happened. And the resilience, what we've learned, what we have all learned together, is what it means to be resilient. And this pandemic has added a layer that none of us would have even thought, could possibly happen, and it's happened. And yet, how humans have survived all these tens of thousands of years, however long we've been on the planet, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, is because we're resilient. And so we all get to witness each other being resilient on our grief support group. So.
Your final exam here, this pandemic, is certainly, that will certainly put all the resilient learning to good use. I love that. And if people are interested, if this class, I hope this workshop, the Resiliency 8-week class happens again in the fall or maybe in the spring, people will be on an email list now and we'll get information about that. So anybody else out there that wants to unmute themselves before we conclude this evening?
I would like to learn more about what hospice is about. And I've known a few people and had a few relatives that have been supported by it, but and I would like to know more about it.
Yes. So thank you, Dawn. When I send the list of resources and the evaluation, which I really hope everybody does, this is one way, this sort of working at home and hosting things that are on the computer in my house. It's hard for the rest of the people I work with to really, unless they come to these events, know what's going on. So the evaluation is extraordinarily important in keeping our community education program going. But I'll also include in the resource list Mission Hospice's website. And if you go on there, you can look, there's quite a lot of information about what hospice actually is, with some videos about it. Family members who have experienced hospice also share some of their stories. And I would really encourage people to take a look and poke around there. There's lots of information about all sorts of things, about the bereavement support services we offer, and for people that are interested in, really trying to understand hospice, there's a lot of information there. And you'll be on our email list, so there'll be I try to keep it to once a month, maybe twice a month, just with people trying to remember when Zooms are. I'd like to remind people a second time. But you'll be getting a series of emails now with information like this and some other ways. We all host a weekly death cafe where people get together to speak about their experience about death, or their dreams, their hopes, their fears about death. It's part of an international franchise movement. We offer that on Tuesday mornings from 10 to 12. We have a bunch of regulars now that come in from all over the country, which is amazing. Next Saturday, which is the 11th, from 1 to 5 Pacific Standard Time, we're hosting Dr. Catherine Shear, who's probably the preeminent expert in the world on complicated grief. She's done years, decades of research. And that would be, people that kind of get to a point in their grief or not, they just are kind of stuck. And the resiliency isn't kicking in, and it's just such a difficult place to be, because it's kind of this feeling of, why did this happen? How did that happen? And, not being able to kind of get out of that stuck place. And she's done a lot of work and has some wonderful things to say about that. It's open to the public, and then there's CEUs for professionals. And so all that information will be included. We have a monthly movie night through November. It's usually the fourth Thursday of the month from 6:30 to 8:30 Pacific time, that explores ideas around death, dying, loss, and grief. Because our goal as a hospice organization is to provide, of course, great care for people as they're transitioning out of this life into the next great adventure, but also to provide education so people don't get to that part without having any opportunity to engage in thinking about what's most important, advanced care planning, trying to think of ways to have conversations and opportunities for people to enter this space in lots of different ways, through writing, through movies, through conversations. So I hope to see you all at some of these other offerings. And Diane, I just, I was kind of in this position, this part of the pandemic where I'm like, are we there yet? And your whole evening has just really, helped me just come back to remembering we're exactly where we need to be, and learning to go with what we are having instead of what we want or don't want is really a decision we can make every day, and I believe it brings a lot more peace of mind. Your words are so beautiful, and your ability to share this experience was just so exquisite. I just thank you so much, and I look forward to having you back for something else, perhaps when you finish your next book, or just to share some poetry. We also are having a woman who is another poet in September 10th during the afternoon, and it's called poetry. It's called a vigil, the poetry of presence, and she's a 30-year hospice worker and works on a project called No One Dies Alone, where she vigils with people who may not have family or other people to be with her. And so that will be another way of using words to articulate experiences that most people are not privy to. So thank you so much. Thank you to your lovely daughter for joining us tonight. And I want to give you just like big jazz hands and claps for the beautiful work.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And